Hey Code Crew, what's up? I've had a bit of time to play around with Xcode 11, and in this video I want to share with you 12 changes and improvements that Xcode 11 brings to the table. Now these new features are really going to help your productivity, so stay tuned. Hey, it's Chris, and if this is your first time here, welcome to Code with Chris, where we teach beginners how to make apps. Now, before we dive into number one, I have a question for you. Have you downloaded and used Xcode 11 yet? Let me know by leaving a quick comment below, yes or no. And on your way down there, please hit the like and subscribe button if you haven't already. I really appreciate that. All right, let's dive in. Number one, run your iPad apps on a Mac with a single checkbox. That's right. So now you have the ability to, if you're building an iPad app, to also allow it to be run on the Mac as a Mac app. And it's very simple to do. Just go into your Xcode project under the project properties, under deployment info, there is a checkbox now for Mac. But as you can see, it requires Catalina. So make sure you have that installed. If you're only building an iPhone app, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to deploy it on a Mac. So as long as you have iPad checked on, you can go ahead and also check off the Mac one, and it's going to tell you how that's going to work. Now, I haven't personally ran an iPad app on a Mac yet, but if you have, let me know how it is by leaving a quick comment below. All right, let's go to number two. Number two, a more flexible and powerful editor area. Now, Apple's whole deal now is that everything is a process of editing, whether you're editing code or you're editing your UI using SwiftUI. So that's why they've invested a lot of improvements into the editor area. Now let me show you some of them. They have this new button up here now called Editor Options, which allows you to configure the behavior of the editor pane that you clicked it for, because later on you're going to see that we can add more editor panes. So these are the options for this pane. You can show the editor only, which is what we're looking at now. You can show a side-by-side canvas, which is basically to preview your user interface if this were a SwiftUI file, but it's not. And also it requires OS Catalina or later, which this computer doesn't have, but later on I'm going to jump on my MacBook where I have installed Catalina and I'll show you this canvas in action. For now, let's keep going. Assistant is what you're used to. It's what we had in Xcode 10 and all those prior versions. It's going to show you the complementary file to what you're looking at. So this is great for the storyboard if you're looking here. And I'm going to jump into the assistant editor. I'm going to see the corresponding class for this view. All right, let's go back to our view controller and take a look at some of the other options here. We've got layout, and right now this doesn't make sense because we only have one editor pane right here, but if we had multiple, you could then orient it horizontally, vertically, and whatnot. Now Minimap, this is an exciting new feature for the editor. This shows you kind of like a bird's eye view of all of your code, and if my code file were longer, I would be able to then drag this. I would see these lines of code going all the way down, and I could drag this little window to navigate my file really easily. And this is in addition to the old jump list that we had. I love this thing too, because you can just select a method and jump down to that. This one just shows you kind of like a high-level view of your code. You can also hover over it, and you can see what the methods are, and you can see some of the keywords are highlighted as well. So this mini-map is a much welcome feature for navigating your editor. Now going down the list, we have authors. Now right now, this isn't connected to any sort of source control, but if it were, I would see a list of authors and commits that has to do with this particular file that I'm looking at. So that's really handy to see who's changed what and when they changed it and why they changed it. It's really handy for source control, and code coverage is for testing. This shows you with the unit test that you have, how well are you testing all of the code in this file, and it's going to highlight all of the parts which are being tested and parts which are not. Invisibles, this is an option to show you the things that are there but that you can't readily see with the naked eye. So for example, if I turn this on, you're going to see how many spaces there are. You're going to see these are like line breaks and things like that. All right, so those are editor options, but not only this, they've also allowed you to add as many editor panes as you want and to arrange them the way that you want. So if you click this button here beside it, add editor on the right, you're going to be able to just add a second pane. And you can keep doing this. You can just change the layout to what you want, right? And sometimes you might want it to be above each other instead of beside each other. If you hold down the Option key, you're going to see that icon change, and you're going to end up adding an editor in the opposite direction. So again, you could do that. I could hold down this Option key and I can add one to the right of this one. And then up here, these are all independent instances of the editor. So for this one, maybe I don't need the mini map. For this one, maybe I want to look at authors. And for this one, maybe I am looking at the storyboard. So I want to look at the assistant editor as well, right? So it's very, very flexible in terms of how you want to arrange this editor view so that you can be more productive when you're coding. Now, some of the time I might want to click on a file and then choose where to put it into one of my existing editor panes. You can do that too. Hold down Option and Shift on your keyboard and then click on a file that you want to load. And that launches something called the destination chooser. You can see that now I can choose a panel to load that file into. Or if you hover in between two editor panes, you can insert a new editor pane with that file right where that blue line is, like that. So all in all, I really like the new editor area, especially if you've got a big monitor. Number 3, SwiftUI and the preview canvas. We can't mention Xcode 11 without mentioning SwiftUI, right? Now here I've got a SwiftUI project. In the editor, if we go into the editor options and we choose canvas, we're going to get to see the preview canvas. Now if I click resume, it's going to show me on the right hand side what my UI looks like based on the code here. As you can see, we've got hello world in our little preview canvas here. Now if I change the text here, let's say just hello, you're going to see it updating there in a live preview. Now this makes it really awesome because you don't have to launch your simulator and see how your UI looks. Back then we had storyboards, it was still visual, but some of the time it would be very glitchy, and what you see in the storyboards is not what you get actually when you deploy it to your device. Now hopefully with this preview canvas, it's not the case, but only time will tell. Personally, I'm really excited to start working with SwiftUI and start teaching it to beginners, because as much as I like using storyboards for teaching and content creation, people still misclick, misdrag, and make mistakes in storyboards, and then they run into roadblocks. At least with SwiftUI and how we're building the UI programmatically with code here, it's a lot less prone to errors because beginners can see exactly what you're typing there, and if they type the exact same thing, they should get the exact same UI that you're seeing. As for how useful SwiftUI is right now at the moment, I would say not very. First of all, it hasn't been really tested in production. It's still an infant technology. In terms of career-wise, a lot of companies aren't willing to invest in brand new technology for their production assets. In terms of learning, there is beginning to be SwiftUI tutorials, but by far the majority of content out there, tutorials, courses, you name it, it's all still based on either programmatic UI or storyboards and interface builder. So it's going to be a little hard to find content to learn from. And shameless plug, I will be releasing a lot of SwiftUI tutorials on this channel, so if you're interested in picking up SwiftUI and learning it, please make sure you're subscribed and hit that bell notification icon so you get notified when those videos drop. Thank you so much for your support. All right, moving on. Number 4, features to work with the new iOS dark mode. So here in the storyboard, if you go down to the View As section here, traditionally you can choose the device and orientation, but there's also an interface style section now that you can choose dark mode, and you can preview how your interface is going to look like in the new iOS dark mode. But in addition to that, there are some really cool features where you can customize assets and colors to change dynamically depending on whether the user is using the light or dark mode. Let me do a quick demonstration for you. So let's take a look at light mode here. Why don't we add an image view? I'm just going to plop it in the middle here, and I'm going to just add an asset here. Let's go into the asset catalog and let's choose something like, I'll choose Xcode since that's what we're doing. I'm going to add that PNG directly into there. So it's kind of a dark PNG. It's going to look, all right, in our image view here in light mode, but if you go into dark mode, you can see that that graphic image is not really visible anymore. So we can actually tell Xcode that we want to use a different graphic if the user is using dark mode, and you don't even have to write any code. So you go into your asset catalog and you choose the asset, and then under appearances, you can actually you can choose which modes that this graphic is going to be used in. So you use it in light and dark, and you can see here that any appearance should be sort of a universal icon that appears great in dark or light. These are light specific and dark specific. So for the universal, I can do something like that. Now, these are not the right sizes. I'm just dragging it there. But for example, in dark mode, I can use something like that, which might look a little better. And we can actually see this in action if we go here. So if we now view as dark mode, you can see that that graphic asset changes to use the icon that I specified for dark mode. All of this happens automatically without any code. And in addition to that, you can also do it with colors. So let's just add a new color set, and we're going to create our custom color here. Maybe we'll make this like a code with crisp blue, something like that. Not quite, but fine. And we're gonna call this CWC blue. All right, so you can do the same thing here. In appearances, just because some colors might not show up that well in dark mode versus light mode. So you're gonna, again, choose this, and then you're going to be able to specify for dark mode, I want, this color instead. And if we go back to our storyboard, and let's say we want to change the background to our label to our CWC blue, right? In light mode, it's going to look like that, but in dark mode, it's going to use the color that I specified. So I think that is so cool. Number 5, localized image assets without writing a single line of code. Let me show you how this works. So for example, let's say we had an image asset that was a flag. So this might be localization specific. If I wanted to change this depending on what the locale of the user was, I would just go to my image asset and click this localize button down here. When I do that, I get to select the language. Now right now I have just English, but you can see now this icon set is for English. If I have other locales, I can select those as well, and they would create different icon sets for me to add icons to. And depending on what locale the user is who is using your app, it would select the right icon set to use. And all of that happens under the hood without you having to write any code at all. Number 6, SF symbols. Now, in the previous part, you saw me dragging icons from icons 8. Well, Apple has designed a set of icons for us to use out of the box, and it's integrated into Xcode, making it very convenient. So as you can see here, there's an icon set of over 1,500 icons in all sorts of sizes and weights as well. So if you wanted to browse all of the available icons, you could download the SF Symbals app from here, and then that would allow you to search and browse. But also inside Xcode, let's say I wanted to, let's just go back to the storyboard. Let's say I wanted to use one of those symbols. I could click on my image asset, and under this image dropdown, instead of just looking at the assets that I have in my asset catalog, here are those SF symbols. As you can see, these are very commonly used in different sorts of apps for different tasks and actions. So I can choose something like that. And the best thing about these icons is that they work great with dynamic type, meaning that if the user has their font sizes larger, maybe bolder because they can't see as well, these SF symbols would adjust according to those font settings on that user's device. And as you can see, the symbols can be colored depending on your project tint colors as well. So I highly recommend that you use SF symbols wherever you can because you get so much functionality for free. Number 7, the iOS simulator has been improved. And one of those things that has been improved is that now it's rebuilt using the Metal framework. So this means that it's really, really fast. Well, at least faster than it was before by a huge margin. You're just gonna have to try it out for yourself to believe. If you've worked with previous versions of Xcode before, I think you'll notice a huge difference right away in how fast this simulator boots up. And speaking of simulator improvements, we have improved debugging options with the simulator. So let me just quickly demonstrate that. I'm just going to hop back into Xcode and I'll rerun this project of ours. And you'll notice down here there is this little icon for environment overrides or environment variables. And this allows you to control on the fly different configurations for your simulator to simulate different conditions of the device. So here's light and dark, you can switch that. This is also great for testing how friendly in terms of accessibility your app is. For example, if you toggle text on, some people might have their text set way up high, some might have it set low, and you can toggle this on demand, on the fly, just to see how your app reacts. In addition to that, you have these different options, all of them to make it really, really easy to make sure that your app is highly accessible. Now, in addition to testing your app under those environment variables and those accessibility options that I showed you, you can also put your app under different network and thermal conditions. Let me show you where this exists. So you need to test this on a real device. If you go under Window and you go to Devices and Simulators, you're going to see the Devices tab, and I have my phone connected right now. Under here, you're going to see a section called Device Conditions. Now, typically, I think you would see something here, but I don't have iOS 13 installed on my phone yet, and so I think that's why I don't see it here. But in this section, you're going to be able to set throttled network conditions, so you can test your app under low bandwidth situations and see how it operates. And you can also mimic different thermal conditions. So let's say your phone is in a really hot environment, or maybe it's in a very cold environment, and you can simulate those scenarios and test your app on your phone under those sorts of environments. So I think that's really, really cool how they figured out a way for us to do that. Number 9, they've integrated the Swift Package Manager directly into Xcode 11. So if you're not sure what that is, just think about CocoaPods. It's a way for you to manage your third-party libraries and dependencies. So let me just show you quickly how it works. I'm looking at a very popular third-party library here called Alamo Fire that helps with networking. So let's say we wanted to use this in our project. In the past, if we were using CocoaPods, we'd have to jump through all of these different steps just to integrate CocoaPods and then to add that pod to our library. Here I'm going to show you how to do it with the Swift Package Manager directly in Xcode 11. So we're going to copy this URL here, or this repository URL. All right, so here inside Xcode, you click your root node here, and then go to your project, and you're going to see a tab called Swift Packages. Click that, and then you're going to see right now there are no packages, but you can click this little plus icon, and then you can enter in that URL just like that. Click on Next. It's going to ask you what version that you need, and then choose Next. It's going to grab it, and then you can just hit Finish, and you'll see it. All right, so let's click Finish, and you're actually going to see it here. Now, the really cool thing is that this code is searchable as well, and all of that you can do without ever leaving Xcode. Number 10, source control improvements. Now, Xcode has always had integrated source control, but they've implemented now the git stash command, which lets you stash away some changes and bring it back later. Now, they've also implemented the git cherry pick command so that you can apply some of the changes in some of the commits to your branch. In Xcode 11, there's also a source control history inspector now, which shows you a history of all of the commits for your project. Number 11, test plans. Apple has rolled out a new feature in Xcode called test plans, which helps you manage test configurations. Now, I'm not too familiar with testing in Xcode, and so I'm going to refer you to this video if you want more information from WWDC, which shows you how to use the new test plans feature. I'll leave the links in the description below. And finally, number 12, improvements in instruments. Now, if you're not familiar with the instruments tool in Xcode, it's basically to profile and analyze your app to measure performance and get diagnostics about where the bottlenecks are and how you can improve its performance. Things like how much memory is it using, how much bandwidth is it using, things like that. Now, I'm not an expert in this area either, and so I'm going to refer you to this WWDC video on how to get started with using instruments. It's not a new tool, but in Xcode 11, they've made improvements and made it more powerful than ever. So what do you think of Xcode 11? If you learned something new, please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and make sure you click that bell notification icon so you can be the first to know when the next video drops. And give this video a thumbs up to let YouTube know that they should share this around. Now coming up, I want to record a video demonstrating how to use Xcode, not just from the standpoint of what's new, but how to use it as a complete beginner. So you'll find that video right there. If it's too early, check back in a couple of days. But if you're watching this maybe a week after this has been published, that video should be up and you should find it over there. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next lesson.